In this lesson, we'll focus on making comments in our code for our web page. At this point, our web page has become increasingly complex. We've managed to stylize our text, add different forms of lists, and section out our web page with divs. It's evolved from plain simple text on a page to a more functional piece of code that the computer can understand. Eventually, our web page will become longer and more complicated, and it will become harder to read. So let's talk about what comments can do to fix these type of situations. Comments are short sentences or statements of plain text that describe our code. Many programmers around the world use whatever spoken language that they're most familiar with in order to describe their code. In this instance, we write our text in English. Comments describe what our code does and sometimes can even help us develop our own thinking process when writing our code. More on this later. Writing comments does not affect your code's functionality. It's similar to sticky notes to remind you about what your code does or what you will be doing in your code later, like a to-do list. You might be asking why you'd ever use comments when you could just go ahead and write your code and be done with it. But it's very good practice to write comments. It helps us remember code we wrote and why we wrote it. Say in the instance your website was going to be managed by a colleague or someone else. Comments will help them easily read and understand the code we wrote. It also helps keep our program organized and structured. Comments are fairly straightforward to write in HTML. In order to write a comment in HTML, we choose a spot in our code to write our comment, and we open up our comment tag with an angle bracket followed by an exclamation mark and 2 dashes. The 3 dots signifies whatever comment we want to write and describe our code. And we can close it out with a closing comment tag by typing 2 more dashes and a closing angle bracket. Notice in the example below that as long as you write your comment in between the opening comment tag and closing comment tag, you are free to write as many lines of comments as you want. It can be a single line of comment or multiple lines of comments. If we compare this to a sticky note, it can be a very short sticky note or a very long one. How long you want to write one is completely up to you, but it's always good practice to be concise, descriptive, and straight to the point as possible. Our previous example didn't show us how comments are used in code. So let's look at a concrete example showing how comments are used in everyday HTML code. Here's an example of commenting a section on a website. Right below the H1 tag containing the sentence, "This is my website," is a comment stating, "This is a section of my favorite animals in a list." And right below that, the programmer has typed out a div section with a class called animals and created an unordered list containing dogs, otters, and turtles. At first glance, it is easy to understand what is going on, but imagine going through thousands of lines of code like that. If the programmer wanted to skim through the code just to find the list of animals, it would be much easier to read through the comments in plain text to find where he wanted to be in the program. At this point in time, we haven't discussed what CSS is. The short definition of what CSS is that it's the portion of code that contains the blueprint that helps us stylize our website and makes it look nice. You have a little taste of what CSS is, having gone through the font styles lesson, so it's good to know how to comment in CSS moving forward. Writing comments in our CSS code is actually simpler than writing it for HTML. The opening comment tag contains a / and an asterisk, which looks like a tiny star symbol. The 3 dots signifies whatever we want to write as our comment, and we can close it out with a closing comment tag with an asterisk and another /. Notice that the opening comment tag has an asterisk after the / and the closing comment tag has an asterisk before the /. So at all times, the entire comment has / in the outermost areas. Furthermore, just like commenting in HTML, we can write as many lines of comments as we want as long as they're in between the opening and closing comment tags, whether it be a single line or multiple lines. In this example, we can see how comments in CSS can help us understand what the code is doing. Here, we can see that the code we're looking at is described as changes the background color of the body to red. In the code, we can see that the body selector between the braces, the code reads as background color red. Now, you might be wondering why the comment symbols for both HTML and CSS are different, but simple and short, HTML and CSS are 2 different coding languages, which is why both languages have their own syntax and ways of writing things. To further emphasize the importance of writing comments in our code, this example shows a great reason as to why we should do it. On the left, there are no comments. Reading this at first glance, it's pretty hard to see what is going on other than that it's 3 images inside a div container. By adding comments, We can see on the right that the div container is the section about our favorite interests and hobbies, and it contains images of Laguna Beach, video games, and dogs. This is something our code couldn't have possibly described to us, even to professional programmers. So, comments are especially important for programmers from any background and level of experience. For further learning, please head over to the assignment section on Replit. It'll give you a great practice activity and further instruction on how comments work.